biggest sea battle of all time is raging. German and British dreadnoughts are locked in combat.
Dreadnought means this ship is fearing nothing. These were the cutting edge of new technology at the beginning of the 20th century.
The ships are heavily armored with immense firepower, the deadliest ever built, and they are designed to be unsinkable.
Sur ces tourelles, il y a des canons dont le calibre est de 34 cm. Qu'un obus, ce qui va sortir du... pèse plus d'une tonne. C'est le poids aujourd'hui d'une petite voiture.
Yet the dreadnoughts cannot deliver a conclusive victory for either side. Shortly after the end of World War I, the German fleet is interned in Scotland. Meanwhile, in Versailles, the Allies are fighting over these valuable spoils of war.
Die Franzosen hätten gerne ein Viertel, die Italiener hätten gerne ein Viertel. Die Engländer wiederum wollen, wenn es eben geht, eigentlich alles.
Under the watchful eye of the British Guards, the German admiral secretly issues a momentous order. Nobody is prepared for what happens next.
Etwas irgendwie in gewisser Weise Mysteriöses oder Geheimnisvolles haftet dem Ereignis nach wie vor an.
100 years later, the scuttling of the German high seas fleet still poses many questions.
Scapa Flow is a big bit of water, but it's a sheltered harbour. So the diving here you don't have the same challenges you would in the open ocean. The wrecks are deep by some people's standards, but they're not that deep. So they're accessible. And it's a very concentrated area of World War I shipwrecks. Underwater, the Markgraf is the most intact, but also the deepest of the German fleet that we dive. And it's 10 meters darker, and she just seems even bigger than the other two just because she's so much more intact. We've got about 145 meters long, just under 30 meters wide, around about 26,000 tons displacement, or if you put her on the bathroom scales, that's what she weighs. So, fingers crossed. First of all, you just think the wreck diving is great without really understanding the history. As I stayed and I learned more and I discovered more on the wrecks, and then you start putting the history with it. And that was me. They're just a fantastic thing to explore. And whether you're into war history or not, or the actual warfare side of what we have here, I think you don't have to focus on that. The architecture alone is like nothing else. We do not build a ship like these anymore.
Man kann die Selbstversenkung gewissermaßen als Sonde verstehen, mit der man hineinhorchen oder leuchten kann. Überhaupt die Rolle, die Seemacht damals noch in ganz anderem Maße als heute gespielt hat. Auch das Prestige, das von Seemacht ausging, das Identifikationspotenzial für Bevölkerung und Nation.
The German fleet was born out of the many hopes and desires of a rising force on the continent. Crucial in all of this, the naval obsession of one man, Kaiser Wilhelm II himself.
Wilhelm II. Formuliert bei seiner Inthronisierung, das Ruder des Staatsschiffes ist mir zugefallen. Und damit wird eigentlich ein privates Interesse Politik.
In 1897, German politicians are convinced that a large fleet will lead Germany to a well-deserved place in the sun.
Wer mitreden will, braucht eben Seemacht, denn Seemacht ist die Voraussetzung für Weltmacht. Und das Deutsche Reich will jetzt Weltmacht werden.
L'Allemagne comprend que si elle veut continuer à avoir cette politique d'expansion mondiale, donc également coloniale, si elle veut continuer à rivaliser avec la Grande-Bretagne, elle doit disposer également d'une flotte puissante armée de Dreadnoughts.
Wilhelm takes a personal interest in the building programs. The Kaiser's naval enthusiasm is spreading fast. The German Flottenverein, a kind of fan club for the Navy, has more than 1 million members. This is the start of a dangerous arms race with the British. Yet when the war starts, the valuable ships are not deployed.
Als der Krieg ausbricht, erwarten viele Leute natürlich, dass die Flotte genauso erfolgreich ist, wie es die deutschen Armeen im Westen sind. Und man ist schon überrascht, dass die Flotte nur im Hafen liegt.
The British conceive a strategy that blocks off the entire North Sea. Every passage of entry is now closed off, even for merchants. Civilians are on food rationing. The Kaiser's prestigious fleet is rusting away in port, useless.
Es gab nur eine größere Seeschlacht, dann U-Boot-Operationen und einige kleinere Kreuzergefechte. Das kontrastierte maximal mit dem, was versprochen worden ist, was die Flotte leisten wird.
Europe is down on its knees. The First World War has claimed 20 million lives on all sides. Many of them lost in brutal battles along enemy lines that barely moved. The soldiers are tired of this war. In Germany, critical voices gain traction. What exactly was the point in building this overly expensive fleet? Has it contributed anything at all to this war?
Das Zeitfenster, überhaupt noch zu zeigen, dass die Marine sinnvoll am Krieg beteiligt war, verkürzt sich rasant. Und in dem Moment wird innerhalb der Marineführung die Idee geboren, man müsse zu einer letzten Schlacht ausfahren, unabhängig davon, wie sie ausgeht. Man geht davon aus, wir werden vollständig vernichtet, aber wir schaffen damit ein Symbol, weil es unbedingt darum geht, der Bevölkerung zu zeigen, es hat sich gelohnt, diese riesige Flotte zu bauen.
Without consulting any German politicians, the Navy gives orders to leave harbour for England. A huge mistake. The crews, sailors, technicians and stokers refuse to engage with this certain death warrant. Instead, they put out the fires in the boiler rooms and take to the streets. The Navy has triggered the November Revolution.
Mit der Meuterei in Wilhelmshaven kommt eine Kettenreaktion in Gang, die deswegen erfolgreich ist, weil letztlich ja gelingt, dass sich viele andere, die ebenfalls mit der Situation und dem gesamten System unzufrieden sind, miteinander verbünden. Also Matrosen, Werftarbeiter, unzufriedene Heeressoldaten, aber auch einfache Bürger.
Workers and soldiers head for Berlin. The country wants change and is on the verge of chaos. The Kaiserreich is facing the abyss. Kaiser abdicates and flees into exile. Philipp Scheidemann proclaims the German Republic.
Arbeit und Soldaten, das Alte und Morsche, die Monarchie ist zusammengebrochen. Es lebe das Neue, es lebe die Deutsche Republik.
The new government negotiates an armistice. As one of the conditions, the mighty German fleet has to be interned until the end of the upcoming peace negotiations. Within 7 days, all ships must be disarmed. Guns, ammunition, and technology are now being dismantled and carried off ship. The newly established soldiers' councils coordinate the workers. But who will lead the ships into internment? With many of the old leaders gone, Rear Admiral Ludwig von Reuter is offered the job.
Er ist mehr oder weniger überzeugt von der Nation, der Monarchie, hat jahrelang für die Marine gedient, glaubt an die mit der Marine verknüpften Ziele. Es ist ihm auch ein inneres emotionales Bedürfnis, die Ziele der Marine zu verwirklichen.
I concluded that in this instance, my personal honor must serve the country.
Er hat das Pech, dass er zur falschen Zeit am falschen Ort ist, sodass er dann eben sagen muss, okay, ich übernehme diese Aufgabe der Überführung, die ja schwierig ist und mit der man eigentlich auch keinen Blumentopf gewinnen kann.
Discover the past with exclusive military history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians, all on History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to watch everything, from the gripping story of the Band of Brothers to Operation Barbarossa and D-Day. Immerse yourself in the dramatic stories of this remarkable era by signing up via the link in the description.
Ludwig von Reuter agrees to the task.
Mein Großvater war sehr verantwortungsvoll und er konnte vor allen Dingen, sagte mein Vater, mit jedem umgehen, mit jeder Persönlichkeit. Das hieß also auch mit den schwierigen Soldaten reden, denn das war nicht einfach, mit den Soldatenräten zu verhandeln. Das war eigentlich die größte Schwierigkeit.
In the early hours of November 19th, an emergency crew of 20,000 men set out to sea. They are heading for the British naval base in Rosyth, near Edinburgh. The first stop will be a rendezvous with the British Grand Fleet before the ships are led into internment, where they wait for the end of the peace negotiations in Versailles. Rear Admiral Ludwig von Reuter is asking the soldiers' councils for restraint. He orders the red revolutionary flags to be taken down. For von Reuter, this journey will be a balancing act. With communist sailors on one side and officers loyal to the Kaiser on the other, all of whom are at the mercy of the British.
Von Reuter is worried if he can manage the political challenges that he's going to face and some of the challenges of negotiation with the British.
The Royal Navy eagerly awaits the arrival of the Germans. The war's sea blockade has been effective, but also inglorious. People in Britain were promised a decisive victory, a second Trafalgar.
Obwohl man gewonnen hat, macht sich maximale Enttäuschung bereit. Und zwar genau wegen dieser Erwartungslast. Und einer Offiziere sagt, we need an ocular demonstration of our power to command the seas. Also eine unmittelbar augenscheinliche Demonstration unserer Seemacht.
The British are planning a spectacle. Even the French and the Americans are sending their dreadnoughts to join this PR opportunity. 450 ships will take part in this unique event, the biggest naval parade of all time.
Here's a defeated navy that's coming to us. We don't really want to say it's a navy that's coming for internment. This sounds far too technical. It's a navy that's coming to surrender to us. And the Royal Navy has again delivered victory.
"8 a.m. The horizon fills with smoke. The spectacle is about to begin. The Grand Fleet has taken on the Spitfire formation to guide the German ships into the bay near Edinburgh.
Rechts und links mit den Geschützen auf die entsprechenden deutschen Schiffe gerichtet, wie die germanischen Sklaven vor den römischen Imperatoren dann marschieren müssen bei den Triumphzügen.
The German ships are now part of a gigantic media event that is intended to visualize Britain's victory over the Germans for people all over the world.
Mighty dreadnoughts, manned by sturdy men. England holds the seas.
Er hat sich größte Mühe gegeben, dieses Ereignis auf See in seiner ganzen Imposanz und Größe der eigenen Seite vor Augen zu führen. Der gegenteilige Effekt tritt natürlich bei der deutschen Seite ein. Ja? Die Situation der Niederlage wird als Ehrverlust wahrgenommen, als schwärzeste Stunde.
For the Germans, this is a deeply felt injustice. Approximately 200 miles north of Edinburgh, the Orkney Islands sit right at the passage between the North Sea and the Atlantic. During the war, the British used this place as a gateway to control the entire North Sea all the way up to Norway. It is here that the Royal Navy is taking the German ships. The islands enclose a natural bay, Scapa Flow. Once a major hub for the Vikings and earlier civilizations, the islands are now remote and sparsely populated. They make a perfect location for the internment of the German high seas fleet. In the island center, the enormous bay, measuring 120 square miles. The German fleet reaches Orkney just 4 days after their humiliating reception in Edinburgh. 74 ships must take their anchor positions as meticulously planned by the British. The ships will dot around the small uninhabited island of Carver.
It must have been a magnificent spectacle to see, because there had been the German fleet escorted by the British fleet. Depending where you lived around Scapa Flow, you would, some places the German ships would have been anchored quite close to land because the water was deep. So people would have been able to see sailors moving around, going about their daily business, and if it's a still day, they would have been able to hear voices and singing or music being played on Sunday sometimes. There would have been that added excitement of having, the German Navy, who had for so long been a bit of a mystery here in the heart of Orkney.
For those living in the small harbour town of Stromness, hosting the German fleet becomes a unique historic event, even if the sailors are not allowed to leave their ships.
So we don't really see the connection with the German fleet as something that's in history. It's something part of the psyche of the place, really.
Yeah, turn it on its side, and so it needs to see the whole. Whether it be the salvage years, whether it be recreational diving, it's shaped the landscape of Scapa Flow ever since. So I think people are interested. You can do whatever you like. Get a drink, come back, have a look, do whatever works.
I gave the centenary a name a few years ago. I called it Scapa 100.
Yeah, we'll see.
Everyone's happy to shift round a bit.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is far more people have turned up than we anticipated. Tonight is the launch of Scapa 100, which will go on for the whole year with lots of different things coming up.
British have already intercepted her radio transmissions. They know
the war had an enormous effect on what it was to be an Orcadian during those years.
But my first working visit was in 2006, which was...
There were people still alive that have been almost directly affected by that.
3D model, and in this 3D model we also have the texture, we have colors which are missing from
The new year has started. The world's eyes are focusing on Paris. Over the coming weeks, a new world order will be decided. Numerous countries take part in the negotiations. Kings, presidents, and heads of state are arriving.
Paris devient une immense ville bourdonnante, bouillonnante de délégations qui vont négocier et discuter de tout. Conférence de laquelle, il faut rappeler, les Allemands sont exclus. On discute du futur traité de paix uniquement entre pays alliés et associés, pour employer
I mean, after all, this was a moment at which three empires have collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, and the Russian Empire. The world order had really fallen apart.
The American President Woodrow Wilson is proposing a radical concept: a League of Nations to guarantee peace. Wilson is far ahead of his time. The war-torn Europeans are more concerned with reparations for their losses. The morning of the 18th of January sees the beginning of the Paris Peace Conference.
Pour les Français, plus jamais ça, l'Allemagne paiera. Pour les Britanniques, bien sûr, plus jamais ça, mais surtout, retrouver le commerce mondial, la route des Indes, retrouver sa richesse et sa domination des mers, donc quasiment mondiales.
Subcommittees are tasked to work out the details of the agreement. Cartographers are drawing new borders. A dozen new countries will emerge. The Naval Peace Terms Committee will decide on the future of the interned German ships.
Die Flotte ist immer noch eine strategische Waffe, mit der man durch Power Projection, wie wir heute sagen, eine Politik machen kann. Und daher wollen von diesen modernen Schiffen auch andere was abhaben. Nicht? Also die Franzosen hätten gerne ein Viertel, die Italiener hätten gerne ein Viertel. Die Engländer wiederum wollen, wenn es eben geht, eigentlich alles.
The British had built their empire on supremacy at sea and really regarded Versailles as being a moment on which they were going to make sure that there would never be another naval challenge from Germany. So Britain was totally behind the idea of reducing Germany's naval strength to nothing.
Orkney would have been playing host to the German Navy, and we didn't know for how long. It turned out to be a lot longer than anybody had anticipated. We have a lot of smaller objects on display in Stromness Museum because we are quite a small museum. We also have more of the domestic objects like cups and plates and some more personal artefacts that would have been used every day by the sailors. One of my favourite objects is this beer tankard, which would have been a personal possession from somebody that was stationed in Scapa Flow. And the translation, roughly, I believe, is music and beer, that is my pleasure.
As it becomes apparent that the peace negotiations in Paris will carry on for many more months, the intern crews enter a long phase of inaction. Days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months.
Der Alltag an Bord, ein von Routine geprägter Alltag. Wie fallen wir nicht dem Lagerkoller anheim? Und ansonsten, wo kriegen wir ein bisschen Wärme her? Wie halten wir unsere Klamotten so weit instand, dass wir damit über die Runden kommen? Und wie, zumindest anfänglich noch, halten wir die Schiffe so intakt, dass sie noch fahrbereit sind, weil man ja anfänglich noch die Hoffnung hat, man kommt mit den Dingern irgendwann wieder nach Hause.
This postcard, picture of a young lady on it, this is dated February 1919, and you will be able to tell me what the postcard says, but it's a tantalising glimpse for us of a personal story.
Yes. So this is obviously a postcard from a girlfriend to her friend, a sailor. It's written, "My dear Martin, meinem Versprechen nachkommend sende ich dir ein Bild von mir. Hoffentlich gefalle ich dir ein wenig. Wenn nicht, kannst du es ja zerreißen. If not, you can rip it."
That's so similar to now when they are on social media, contacting each other, and they wonder if they're going to like the picture, and if they don't, you know, they won't like it on
a
Facebook.
kind of WhatsApp of that time,
exactly.
Even with the content, so it's not going very deep. Das wenige, was halt von britischer Seite erworben wurde, wurde mit sogenannten Driftern übergeben. Und zu diesen Drifterbesatzungen, die man ja nur immer wieder sah, entspann sich natürlich irgendwann ein Verhältnis. Und auf diese Art und Weise kam es doch in bescheidenem Umfange zu Kontakt zwischen Briten und Deutschen und trug ja ein Stück weit auch zum Einkommen ein. Nicht zuletzt über einen doch offensichtlich florierenden Schwarzmarkt.
The sailors used the drifter crews to trade in their medals and iron crosses in exchange for everyday items, such as soap and milk. When there is nothing left, they start to trade in parts of the ships.
Arcadians are very practical and like useful objects, and the quality of the spanners are very good. So I think lots of the spanners found their ways into local garages and workshops and in use by local people. There's probably quite a few still prized possessions in men's garages.
Leben in der Warteschleife bezeichnet es sehr gut, und je länger die Warteschleife dauerte, desto mehr wirkte natürlich die Frustration und bauten sich alle möglichen Emotionen auf, die schwer in den Griff zu bekommen waren.
These heavily armoured ships are designed for battle and not as a permanent home. To many, they feel more like steel coffins.
Big ships are breeding grounds of discontent. They try to make life for the officers, and particularly for von Reuter, nightmare.
On board, old conflicts are rising to the surface. A two-class system has been designed by officers to keep the manual labourers at arm's length. However, since the November Revolution, the tide has turned.
Und das kosten die jetzt aus ihrer Perspektive, wo sie ja im Prinzip das Sagen an Bord haben, kosten die das auch. Das ist die klassische Rache.
Rear Admiral von Reuter finds it increasingly difficult to issue even the simplest orders. The soldiers' councils demand a say in all the decisions. Every order is subject to their approval.
Man muss ja immer die Zeit berücksichtigen, was da los war in Deutschland während dieser Wirren. Und trotzdem mussten sie gehorchen. Ich denke mal, auf heutige Zeit übertragen wäre es ein Chaos gewesen.
These people on the flagship are communists of the very worst kind. I have found out firsthand that systematically and with foresight, people trampled, even danced on top of my room with wooden slippers, day and night. My chief of staff was presented with a mess at night and also during the day when members of the crew carried out small and large urges above his side window, so that it would penetrate the chamber. They ambushed the first officer of the Admiralty and threatened to throw him overboard.
Aus Sicht der Mannschaften ist das Einfachste, so viel Lärm zu machen, dass sie einfach nicht zur Ruhe kommen. Der ist also in jeder Hinsicht zermürbt.
At the end of the day, his role is to try and maintain a kind of a stability so that there isn't an explosion which allows the British the excuse to board the ships. He has to keep the lid on the pressure cooker.
Er muss mit seinen eigenen Mannschaften Auskommen finden. Er muss versuchen, Informationen darüber zu bekommen, wie überhaupt die Zukunft seines ganzen internierten Verbandes aussieht. Man kann davon ausgehen, dass die Verantwortungslast auf von Reuters Schultern nicht gering war und die Situation alles andere als einfach, ja, in jeder Hinsicht.
Meanwhile, in Versailles, things are not looking good either. There is disagreement on almost all points of the treaty. Months have passed and produced few results. Now time is running out.
The naval question clearly isn't the leading question, that's for sure. But it's all the settlement of the naval issues can cause an immense problem for the resolution and the finding of peace.
The bitter negotiations of the Naval Peace Terms Committee turn into the Sea Battle of Paris. A solution for the interned fleet must finally be found.
Da gibt es verschiedene Optionen. Eine Möglichkeit wäre, die deutsche Flotte wird unter den Alliierten aufgeteilt. Oder unter den Siegermächten. Oder die deutsche Flotte wird einfach versenkt. Oder, sehr unwahrscheinlich, die Flotte wird zurückgegeben an die deutsche Seite. Sehr unwahrscheinlich.
Eh bien, les Français se disent, nous avons perdu, pendant la guerre, exactement 125 000 tonnes de bateaux de guerre. Eh bien, dans cette marine allemande qui est à Scapa, on veut récupérer de quoi recréer notre marine de guerre.
And the British were saying, excuse me, no. You know, we want to keep naval supremacy. I mean, their thinking was that they didn't want an old traditional enemy, to start biting their heels again with a naval threat.
The Americans have different plans altogether. To shift the balance of power in their own favour, it is crucial that the British cannot have any more ships.
Denn die haben angefangen, und die hatten auch die Ressourcen dafür, nicht nur eine, sondern im Prinzip 2 Flotten zu bauen, eine für den Atlantik und eine für den Pazifik.
Those countries who were allies now started to fight amongst themselves for a share of the pie.
Other parties are joining the debate. Belgium, Portugal, China and Brazil all feel entitled to their own share of the German fleet.
Lorsque il s'agit d'écrire le traité, eh bien, aucune décision finale n'a encore été prise, puisqu'il est simplement spécifié dans le traité que les bâtiments n'appartiennent plus à l'Allemagne.
On May 7th, a first draft of the treaty is distributed to the press.
Es ist ja eigentlich kein Entwurf, es ist ja im Prinzip schon der Vertrag. Nicht? Also die Deutschen können ja so viel gar nichts mehr daran ändern. Für die Offiziere ist jetzt endgültig klar, dass ihre Welt zusammengebrochen ist. Also das ist etwas, was natürlich wie ein Hammerschlag auf viele wirkt.
Das ist kein milder Frieden, das ist auch ein Frieden, der für die Marine eigentlich ehrlos ist.
Von Reuter realizes if this treaty is signed, he will lose his ships. The German Navy is reduced to a minimum. The Navy is finished. Hardly better, if his government refuses to sign, the British will take over the ships with force.
He feels that in both situations, he's at a loss.
The current schedule, on June 21st, the Allies expect the terms to be accepted.
Im Prinzip ist das eine lange Kette von Kontrollverlusten. Jetzt kommt alles darauf an, wie man darauf noch reagieren kann.
Von Reuter reduces manpower. Only the most loyal 1,700 crew remain on board the 74 ships.
Put yourself in Reuter's position right now. He doesn't have any choice. His only choice is to deny the Allies what they want, which are his ships. The deadline is approaching. He knows that the Allies will come and try and take the ships anyway. So the clock is ticking.
Es gibt nur eine Option, die alle Ansprüche erfüllt. Ich muss dafür sorgen, dass die Flotte nicht in Feindeshand fällt, sich selbst versenkt, ein ehrendes Zeichen setzt. Im Prinzip so ein symbolischer Kampf, ja? Die Engländer haben alles dafür getan, um ihren symbolischen Sieg zu inszenieren. Jetzt muss die deutsche Seite alles dafür tun, symbolisch ihren Prestigesieg zu inszenieren, ja? Indem man mit wehender Flagge unter der Nase der englischen Bewacher die Schiffe versenkt. Das muss jetzt nur in Gang gesetzt werden.
After 7 months of waiting, von Reuter secretly issues an order. Prepare to scuttle. To protect his superiors in the Navy from repercussions, von Reuter claims to have reached this decision on his own. However, confidential letters that were later salvaged from his personal vault suggest a different story. During the war, the Navy had learned that dreadnoughts are indeed not unsinkable. Yet scuttling 74 ships simultaneously, without any weapons, will be a new challenge. Nick Jellicoe is a descendant of an important British dreadnought-era admiral. He is working on an animation about the final hours of the German high seas fleet.
we can take this beautiful shot and then change the perspective, flip her around on the model, and start on this, and then dissolve into the model. It would help us explain, okay, how a ship is really sinking. So I think, here we've got... And so this was a very carefully managed maneuver. So you must think through for each ship how you can actually sink your ship in the fastest way possible, in the most efficient way possible, opening the seacocks to let the water in. But when you do that, taking off the handles and throwing them overboard, or using acid on the threads so that you couldn't actually thread back, or just hammering them. And then the other thing that it's very dangerous once you start doing this. As the water rises, all the electrical systems start failing, so you've got people working in the dark. So you've got to make sure that you have your people outside at the correct time. Okay.
One, 2, 3, and go.
In Orkney, Midsummer's Day 1919 started like any. It would end like no other.
June 21st. Von Reuter assumes the deadline will expire around midday. In the last few days, the British Guards have been particularly vigilant. Do they know something is going on? 9:45 a.m. Unexpectedly, the British battle squadron lifts anchor. The unit is withdrawn for a torpedo exercise out in the North Sea.
Für Torpedoübungen braucht man gutes Wetter. Und das war eben an dem Tag.
Taking the battle squadron out for a torpedo practice on this day, the 21st of June, probably the most significant day in the calendar of this fleet, and you decide this is the day you're going to send a very strange signal.
Es ist nicht ganz eindeutig, ob die Engländer zumindest was geahnt haben oder vielleicht sogar teilweise was davon wussten, vielleicht sogar die Befehle von Reuter mehr oder weniger mitgekriegt haben.
Being cut off from any source of information, von Reuter doesn't know that in Versailles the deadline was postponed. He raises his first signal. Prepare to scuttle. Exactly 100 years later, the German Navy and the British Royal Navy meet in Scapa Flow. It is the culmination of the Scapa 100 celebration. The dive boat takes centre place.
It's Jen, Kevin. Just so we don't confuse Pharos as she's coming in, do you want to just come and sit the other side of us so she's got room to manoeuvre?
The divers have prepared for this manoeuvre for a long time.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as you're happy with that, we'll do that.
Civilians from the Orkney Islands, as well as high-ranking officials from both countries, commemorate this final turning point of World War I. Paragraph 11, confirm. With this simple code, Rear Admiral von Reuter sets the wheels in motion, a process that is now unstoppable. Shortly after receiving the orders to scuttle, the crew engage in carefully prepared steps to sink their own ships. On the large battle cruisers, the crew work their way to the inner core of the ship. Deep down in the body of the ship, they open the seacock so that water will enter the hull. They destroy threads and throw all handles and cranks overboard. All doors, ventilation shafts, bulkheads, portholes and condenser hatches are now being opened, wedged so that seawater floods in and cascades through the ships. Closing them up again has just become impossible. As the ships are drawn underwater, some of them are tilting, rolling over. Metal can be heard scratching, screaming, and aching.
Pandemonium, chaos. The only people who are left in harbour to try and do something about this are the trawlers and a couple of destroyers. And so they're going madly, running back and forth over the flow, trying to push German sailors back onto these ships.
Als sie dann in den Rettungsbooten waren, ja, dann passierte eben das, was hätte nicht passieren sollen, dass man dann auch halt sein Leben damit riskierte. Und das war meinem Großvater auch schon klar, also das muss man schon sagen.
Machine gunning and shooting left and right. 8 sailors are shot unarmed. Not only unarmed, but also probably in their boats under white flags. And that's the disgraceful thing of what happened on this day.
Wenn man sich die Ereignisse in Scapa abschließend anschaut, dann kann man nun einmal erkennen, wie kaiserliche Seeoffiziere gedacht haben, wie sie am Ende einem alten Ehrenkodex folgend auch gehandelt haben.
Man könnte überlegen, ob man das Ereignis vielleicht schildern könnte wie eine Zwiebel mit verschiedenen Schichten an Bedeutungen, die man abtragen kann, die aber alle miteinander zusammenhängen. Ja? Allerdings im Kern bleibt dann eigentlich nichts übrig, ja? Weil eigentlich könnte man auch sagen, hat die ganze Aktion auch schon was Absurdes oder Sinnloses. Es wird für Milliarden eine hochmoderne Schlachtflotte gebaut, die dann ein paar Jahre später einfach selber versenkt wird. Man kommt nicht umhin, darüber der Absurdität und der Ironie, die in dieser ganzen Sache liegt, die zur Kenntnis zu nehmen.
In his Dutch exile, the abdicated Kaiser learns about the scuttling of his beloved fleet. He weeps. In Versailles, reactions are mixed. The scuttling solves a lot of problems for the British and for the Americans. The French are fuming.
Et la presse dit, regardez, les Allemands sont bien évidemment des traîtres. Eh bien, ce sont les Huns et les Félons qui ont sabordé leur flotte.
The French quickly blame the British for encouraging the scuttle as a result of their poor guarding of the Germans. To compensate for the lost ships, the Allies demand the surrender of other remaining ships, and also most of the German merchant fleet. After a delay of 7 days, the Treaty of Versailles is finally signed. Scapa Flow falls silent. The intern crews are treated as prisoners of war and are kept in captivity on the British mainland for another 7 months. The Treaty of Versailles is highly unpopular in Germany and a heavy burden for the young Weimar Republic. When von Reuter returns, the German Navy glorifies the scuttle.
Dieser Heldenmythos ist sehr begrenzt auf die Kreise, die also auch schon vor 1914 einen gewissen Marineenthusiasmus hatten. Alle anderen haben andere Sorgen. Die Inflation ist ja durchaus schon spürbar.
Ten years after the scuttle, the global economic crisis has spared the people of Orkney. The salvage of the wrecks is in full swing. Clever entrepreneurs are making the business of a lifetime. Almost all ships are brought to the surface and then scrapped. Salvaging the German high seas fleet is the largest operation of this kind ever to take place. What was scuttled within hours now takes over 17 years to fully resurface. The German steel is popular. One of the clients, Adolf Hitler. Hitler passes the so-called Z Plan to secretly build a new navy. It is a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Yet popular opinion is on his side. A new navy is born, and a new world war is on the horizon. The events of Scapa Flow serve as a model. In 1942, the Nazis are about to take over French ships in the port of Toulon. Admiral Jean de Laborde orders the scuttling. Shortly after, the Nazis threaten to take over Danish ships. The fleet also scuttles.
This story has faded into a footnote in history. Something that was so large, so significant. This was, after all, the sinking of a fleet that was at the very heart of why our countries went to war. And it is relevant to what's going on today. The growth of nationalism, it's pushing us back to the thinking in Scapa Flow.